All right, so now let's see how we can execute this encrypting our password functionality once, so that it can take effect whenever we are modifying the password in any part of our application. So what you will do is, let's come back to Visual Studio Code, and in our user model, right, this user model, Mongoose has a method that you can apply on this user model to modify your password, or not just your password, to modify any piece of data before you save it. So let's implement that. So first off, I'm going to bring in Bcrypt. So we needed this Bcrypt package here, so we're going to bring it inside of Mongoose. In fact, I can actually cut it because I don't need it here anymore. So I'll come to my user model, and then I'll just import that. All right, great. Now I'll come to the bottom of this application, and then at the bottom here, I'm just going to implement that. So here, let's add the comment. So what was that comment we added? We wanted to encrypt the password before saving to the DB. Yeah, so this one here, I'll just copy that, and then I'll just head back here. So let's just, this comment is for you because I already know what's going on. So here I'll just say user schema, because remember, this model is using this schema, which is like the skeletal structure of the data we are saving. So you see, this is the user schema. So we are saying that this user schema, before we save it, we want to modify at least one piece of data, which is the password. So the way you do that is you use .pre. So user schema .pre, and then you just open the parentheses. So what do we want to do? Well, we want to say that before we save any piece of data, we want to execute a function that will hash the password. So I'll just have my async function, so async, and then I'll just use a regular function here, and technically we're just going to open it up here with parenthesis, and then come here, and yeah, just like that, just a regular function inside here. Now this function, we will need to have our next parameter here, because whenever we execute what is inside this function, we want to be able to move on to the next line of code. We talked about the next parameter when we were discussing middleware, when we're introducing you to middleware. Great, so we have the next here. Now let's just come here, I'll tab this, open it up, and technically what do I want to do? I want to hash the password. So hash password, and I'll just come here and just grab this guy. So grab this guy, I can cut it because I don't need it here anymore, and then I can even delete this comment. And then let's head back to our user model, and then come down to the next line and paste that. So if you see, we just took that function that was in the user controller, and we're now applying it here, but then there's just a slight modification we need to do. So the first thing is we're generating a salt. Yeah, that's fine. Then we're creating this hashed password variable, and we say await bcrypt.hash and password. So now we cannot point to this password directly because technically it's not yet a variable, it's just a property in this object we're saving to the database. So for us to be able to point directly to this password here, we need to add this keyword. Okay, so here, instead of just saying password, we're going to say this dot password to tell this file that we are referring to the password property that is inside of this file. Technically, that's just what we just did here. Then I will now come down, add an extra line after we've hashed the password. I'll now say that look, this password, so this dot password should be equal to the hashed password. So copy that and just slot that here. Okay, so now in this our user controller, remember we said that the password should be set to the hash password, but we don't even have that here anymore. So you can go ahead and remove this hashed password. All right, so now the controller will just send this normal password that comes from the front end, but before it is saved in the database, it will be modified. Okay, that's what this pre means. In other words, before you save it or before you execute the function to save it in the database or to create a new object in the database, hash the password. So this is all we need. Now, whenever you're registering, this will be fired. Whenever you're changing your password from within the application, this will be fired. Whenever you're resetting your password, this piece of functionality will be fired. But there is one more thing we need to take cognizance of, and that is the fact that there are sometimes when we are not directly modifying the password, we are just modifying other properties inside of this what's it called, model. So let me show you so that we are on the same page. So if you come here to the front end, oh, I've already logged out, so let me not log in again to save time. So but remember, we have the functionality to edit our profile. When you're editing your profile, we're not necessarily changing the password, we are just editing other properties like our name, the phone number, the bio and stuff. So when we're executing that function, we don't want to change the password. We want to just say that, look, just ignore the password field. So how am I going to specify that specific instruction? I'll add an if statement. I'll say if, and then I'll just open this up, and then what do I want to check for? I'll say if the password field is not modified. Okay, so the way you do that is this dot is modified. So you want to check if something is modified. Then you just open your parenthesis and specify the field you're referring to, and in our case it's password. Okay, but we don't want to check if it's modified, we want to check if it's not modified. So here we're just going to have our exclamation mark. So technically I'm saying that, look, if this password field is not modified, okay, then what do I want to do inside here? Well, I don't want to do anything, so I'll just say return, and then I'll call this next object here. So I'll say return next. All right, so basically I'm saying that if the password field is not modified, go to the next piece of code, which is going to be this one. Sorry, which is not going to be this one, which is going to be whatever it is that is in your maybe controller or whatever it is you're trying to do. That's what we just did here. Great. So now I can go ahead and save, and then let's test it again just to be sure that what we did worked. So I'll come to my file here and I'll create user 3. So let's come here. I'll just okay, this is where I need to change it. Okay, so I don't know why my computer is just hanging, but I'll just delete this user 1 and make it user 2, and then I'll send. Fingers crossed. Aha, so you see we've created user 2, which is this email here. Let's go to the database to confirm that we actually created it. So I'll open that up and MongoDB, and then I'll just refresh. So refresh. Aha, so now let's scroll down and see. So you see here we have user2@gmail.com, voila, and you see we have the password encrypted. So now whatever, anything you do that has to do with changing the password, this file that we created now will ensure that the password is always encrypted before it is saved. All right, so that's about it for this one. I hope you appreciate the fact that we are taking this thing step by step and we are explaining what every step does. All right, one more thing before I forget is that after you hash the password, you also want to call the next function so that whatever, if there's any next piece of code that needs to be executed, it will be executed. So you just add your next after you've hashed the password as well. That's all. So that's about it for this one. See you in the next one.